Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending today's webinar, On-Demand Color Label Printing. Drive business value with a smarter, more flexible color print solution. My name is Kate Cruz, and I'll be your moderator today. Just some general housekeeping notes before we get started. Today's presentation shouldn't last longer than 45 minutes, and there will be a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. We'll address as many of your questions as possible. Also note, this webinar will be archived on demand immediately following, so keep an eye out for an email on how to access it. Regarding this webinar environment, you'll see some icons at the bottom of your screen which enable you to do a number of different things. You'll see a Q&A icon which allows you to type in your questions and submit them. Again, we will address these questions at the end of the webinar. You can email out of this platform if you want to notify any of your peers about this webinar while you're watching it, and also share it through various social media platforms. You can learn more about our presenters by clicking on the speaker icon. We want you guys to be truly engaged during this webinar, so we're giving you the necessary tools to be active. And with that being said, let's meet our presenters. Andy Scherz is a Senior Product Manager at Epson, tasked with developing the market for on-demand industrial color label printers. He was a veteran of the industrial label printing market with over 20 years experience, most recently at Epson, and before that at Printronix as Director of Product Marketing. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering and a Master's in Business Administration, both from California State University. We also have with us Steven Feinstein, who has been with Peak-Ryzex since its inception in 1986 as one of the first field service engineers supporting enterprise printing systems for customers in the tri-state metropolitan area. Through his years of experience and deep knowledge of printing solutions, Steven has designed, integrated, and delivered thousands of printing solutions for customers in a number of diverse vertical markets, including manufacturing, chemical, pharma, and specialties applications. In his current role as nationwide senior solution consultant for enterprise printing systems, Steven is deeply focused on GHS labeling solutions and assisting customers in generating value beyond compliance for their GHS printing needs. Again, just a reminder, we're going to be rolling into a live Q&A at the end of this webinar and today's presentation. So remember to submit any questions that you may have. All right, I think we're good to go, so I'm going to hand over to Steven. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kate. Again, my name is Steven Feinstein. I'm a Senior Solution Consultant for Enterprise Printing here at Peak-Ryzex. Just wanted to start out real quick with just a little slide about Peak-Ryzex. As Kate mentioned, I've been with the company since its inception. I've done a lot of different roles within the organization, all involved around enterprise printing solutions. We're currently a Keystone Capital company, which means that we're able to grow and be profitable through acquisitions, through strength, through building talent. And if you know anything about us, you'll know that for decades we have been the market leader in manufacturing, distribution, and anything that involves supply chain industries. Of course, we go a lot beyond that as well, but again, it's a core feature of what we do. With 480-plus employees, a lot of them being customer field service engineers providing break-fix support, and of course all the support people behind them, and solutions consulting, and account managers, and back office personnel, I like to focus less on the quantity and more about the quality. Our employees have high quality standards when it comes to what they do. I know in the case of our field service engineers, the average tenure with the organization is over 20 years. And that says a lot about commitment to the organization, and of course, myself included, being here for the long haul to make sure that we deliver solutions for our customers. We do have that international presence in Europe as well as in Canada. And, of course, a large diversified customer base. And this is one of the things I really enjoy about my job being a solution consultant. I get to work with all different kinds of customers in all different kinds of markets and verticals, whether it be from the Fortune 500, from our over 8,000-plus active customers, down to the thousands of small and medium business customers and the regional customers who we either provide live support for or customer service or new equipment or solution. Now, of course, having partnerships and relationships with our vendors is very important in this case, and we strive to have the best relationships with our vendors. And the relationship is very strong, and we really rely on that to make sure we have the right solutions in place for our customers. Now, of course, everything we do needs to deliver business results. I like to say that if what we do can't save you money, make your money, or enhance your productivity and improve the image of your organization, you probably won't do it, and I wouldn't blame you. So all of our solutions are based on that commitment to delivering business results for your organization. Let's take a minute to talk about the agenda today. What we'd like to talk about, we certainly do have a lot of informative information for you that relates to enterprise printing and color labeling in particular. We're going to hear from Andy Scherz from Epson about a review of their new color inkjet labeling technologies, and this is really a game changer in this type of environment. I've been with enterprise printing for over 30 years, and I am more excited about what's happening now in the environment with respect to technologies like Epson is providing than I ever have before in my career. It's also important to talk about where trends are going, because who's doing what and why they're doing it is certainly a leading indicator towards what we're certainly going to see in the future with trends in color labeling. We'll talk about the markets and industries that can take advantage of color and leverage it in their organizations, as well as how do you introduce it into industrial applications, which have typically been monochrome labeling in the past. Now, of course, all of this is designed not just to add color, but to increase productivity and streamline the label production process, because we see a lot of customers who are mired in all kinds of pre-printed forms and all different types of processes to get their labels out that inject error or cause issues or have high costs associated with them. Of course, it all comes down to what you're actually printing on, and that is the label, the substrate, or the media that you're using. So, of course, we have in place the solutions to provide the right media and, of course, the right software to create the image that you want for your color labels. We're going to spend a little time talking about real-world color labeling successes. We have a couple of success stories that we're proud of that have involved a color and a transition from either preprint or monochrome to color. And, of course, we do have time available for your questions today. With that, I'd like to hand it off over to Andy. And, Andy, if you'd like to tell us about what's going on with the Epson inkjet color technology and, of course, with Epson in general, thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Steve. Okay, so what I want to talk about a little bit at first is, I'll give a little bit of a broader perspective on Epson. Today we're going to be focusing in on our color label products, but I think people oftentimes are not even aware of what all Epson does, okay? And I just want to talk about, all of the different industries, and really stressing, because I think a lot of people might have some familiarity with Epson. Maybe they went into a Staples or Best Buy and saw a little Epson printer in there and thought, oh, that's kind of cute, but is that really an industrial product, or does that come from a company that knows anything about industrial products? And I just want to point out that at this point, Epson is the leader in many different industries, okay? So, for example, we are making projectors for events. Okay, these are the kind of things that would be in a stadium, or when you see a gigantic display in Manhattan or something lit up. I mean, we're talking huge displays, commercial, industrial projectors, and we're winning lots of that business. We have the #1 maker of photo lab equipment. So if you were to go get what you quote unquote, for those who might remember, film and got it developed, that's almost for sure going to be printed and developed, quote unquote, on an Epson product. We make industrial presses. And in fact, we are really beginning to take and become the leader in printing on fabric. So if you write bicycle jerseys or, clothes with lots of colors on it, these are all done in commercial presses on Epson product. Epson really is a leader in industrial business class products, okay? Of course, we're the world leader in thermal transfer printers, which might be a surprise. Of course, we're talking about the POS type printers. We make more units than anybody. So Epson really is a commercial printing, commercial products company, and is a leader in almost every industry that it's in. Maybe it holds the #1 or #2 slot. So with that said, we're finding that people are looking towards on-demand color, and they're trying to decide who should they partner with, okay? And in that vein, I'd just like to point out that Epson is a $12 billion global company. I mean, this is a major company that can really stand behind their products. We're leader in almost every area we compete in. Most specifically and relevant to this market, we have the #1 on-demand color label printer. Okay, so we hold the top spot in on-demand color labeling, and we've only entered that market a few years back. So I think that's a quite impressive feat. We're also the hold the #1 most popular label press with our Scherz L4033 product. Again, a relatively late entrant to the market, and to jump to that spot is quite impressive. Of course, #1 in projectors, #1 in thermal POS printing. The point being that Epson strives to be the best, and they do this by being a technology and patent leader. And I think this is what I want to try to stress here when we talk about the products, is we are not just a system integrator or we grab components from other vendors or something like this. We are a hard engineering company with a strong focus on quality. So we've we've taken over a massive chunk of the photo printing business with one simple rule: make extremely high-quality products with superb print quality. Okay, so let's very specifically think about how does this affect us in the industry that we're trying to talk about here today. Okay, the Epson technology is completely vertically integrated, and what that means is it is Epson's head, it's Epson's ink, it's Epson's firmware, it's Epson's print mechanism, it's made in an Epson factory. So, for example, some of the most popular thermal transfer makers make their printers in a contract manufacturer somewhere off in China. Nothing from Epson. Epson is all made by Epson employees with very, very strict quality standards. Okay. What does that mean a lot of times to our industrial end users is there's one throat to choke. Okay, so they were not going to be in the finger-pointed game of, well, what ink did you use, or what head are you using, or what printer was that in, or well, we get our heads from this company, we get our this. No, if there's a problem with the solution, it's Epson's problem. Okay, and I think that is very reassuring, and I think that for people going out trying to grow this on-demand industrial business, this is what you want, is a supplier who's going to stand by the whole thing. The next point I'd like to point out is how committed we are to this space. Okay, Epson really wants to own everything to do with labeling. Okay, and that when you look at the whole spectrum of labeling, it encompasses a lot. And in fact, we're the only company that goes all the way down from a $1,800 desktop printer for on-demand color labeling all the way up to $500,000 UV high-speed, high-quality press. Okay, so some people say, well, what market are you trying to serve? We're making great products, trying to serve the entire labeling spectrum, and we decide what, let the market decide what's the best product for their solution. But Epson is making a broad-based, major investment into this space. Okay, we see this as a huge growth opportunity for the company. As demonstration of that, just our latest head technology is a $300 million investment. Okay, so what we did is we said the core of these printers is the print head. Okay, it's kind of like the engineered car. If we can put whatever kind of cup holder and mirrors and paint job on it, but the thing that's going to really get you there is the engine. Okay, and this is where we put the majority of our investment. To give you an idea of how large that is, our spend on that head was $300 million. You look at what would be considered, quote, a competitor to ours, like VIP Color. Their whole annual revenue is in the low single-digit millions, okay, versus our R&D spend. Okay, so this is a major commitment from a major player that you really can count on when you go into your substantial enterprise accounts. So let me talk a little bit about why that head is so valuable, because this is really the core of the printer itself, okay? Epson uses a completely different technology than most of the other manufacturers, and I'll just briefly get a little bit technical just to give you an idea, because this is going to become important, and one of the most common questions is going to come up related to this head when we talk about selling. But basically, Epson uses what they call a micro piezo method. It uses a piezo effect, which says that, if you look at those little charts, if I apply a voltage to the head, elements within the head will flex. That flexing causes a mechanical displacement and pumps ink. So if you look at the little diagram, if I take the piezo and I apply a voltage or reverse the voltage, it shrinks or expands, and basically it pumps it out. Just like if I have a syringe and I squeeze the syringe and I squirt out a certain amount of medicine. So if I want to put 1 cc in, I very precisely squirt the syringe, I get exactly 1 cc out. It's a very precise method. Okay. Well, then what's the other way to do it if you don't use the piezo method that Epson uses? The most common method used by manufacturers like HP or Memjet, something like this, is what they call the thermal printing method. What the thermal printing method uses is it has a heating element by each little nozzle. Okay? By suddenly applying a burst of heat, you'll boil some amount of the liquid, and the boiling will create bubbles and it'll spurt some ink out. Okay? How much ink comes out depends on the properties of the liquid and how accurate its boiling point is and how hot it got and all this kind of stuff. And but anyways, it's just basically, again, going back to my syringe analogy, I put the syringe in the arm, and then I put a lighter underneath the syringe, and hopefully I boil some of the liquid, and some goes into your arm because of the bubble, and we'll call that however accurate that is, okay? The problem with that method, though, is that anybody knows if you heat something up and cool it off all the time, it will fail. That's the same reason why if you leave a light bulb on, it might last a long time, but if you keep flicking it off and on, it burns out very quickly. Same is true with these heads, okay? because of the heating and cooling cycles, and of course this is happening millions and millions of times, for every dot, the heads quickly fail. Okay, so you might see a head that would fail as short as 500,000 inches, which is maybe only, a fourth or an eighth the life of a thermal transfer print head, which already is a little bit frustrating at how often it fails. Okay, there's nothing they can do about it. It's just inherent in all the heating and cooling cycles. So this leads to one of the most common questions I get when talking to people about the product is, how much is a replacement head and how long does it last? And I said, well, actually, I don't even know what the cost of a replacement head is because it's not really something, it's not a consumable, and you don't plan to ever replace it in the life of the printer, okay? And secondly, it's not intended to fail. So it's a major point because if you're using these printers in a business-critical environment, of course you need the head to work because that's what's making the image. And if it's constantly failing some of these users are seeing failures within 6 weeks, 7 weeks, or 2 months, it's a really problem. The second downside of the thermal inkjet versus the micropiezo is it doesn't know if it's lost a dot. Okay, so the Epson technology can auto-detect if anything did fail, it would know it. Okay, as opposed to the thermal inkjet, it basically doesn't know it. Okay, and then it's up to the operator to catch the print quality defects. Okay, so you have a kind of an interesting opposite scenario here where you have a print head that lasts the life of the mechanism, and by the way, can tell its own health, versus a mechanism that will not last that long, and by the way, doesn't know when it fails. This is a huge difference, and this leads to a tremendous competitive advantage for this technology and makes it uniquely suited for selling into the industrial space. So let me show you the product lineups that we have right now. We have our 7500G and our 7500 printer. This is pretty much our flagship and is really what I'm going to call the ghost of future products that will come from Epson. This product is an 11.8 inch per second printer. That's almost 60 feet a minute. Okay, so if you put an 8-inch roll, it takes a full 8-inch roll internally. The whole thing will be done in basically 6-7 minutes. Okay. By the way, it only has one print mode, which is best quality, fastest speed, which is 1200 by 600 graphics at almost, 2 labels a second if you talk by 4 by 6 labels. Okay. It supports the Zebra language and could go directly plug and place in place of a Zebra printer. And by the way, you could put the color elements in the printer's memory and drop-in replacement, be printing color on demand without any modification of the host application. Okay. We have two products, the 7500G and 7500. You might ask, well, what's the difference between the two? We show it on this slide here. It's just the ink. It's the exact same printer, but we have different ink. One optimized more for glossy media, one optimized more for matte media. And it's just because of the difference of the way the ink lays down. Basically, the gloss media, the G printer can print on any kind of media, but it's a little bit less black than when you use it on a matte media. And the 7500 cannot print on gloss, but gives you a much, much darker black on matte media. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, we have the 3500, which is also a 4-inch printer, a little bit slower at about 3.4 inches per second, which actually is still good for maybe 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000 labels a day. Okay. It has very good print quality, not quite as good as the 7500, but 720 by 360 is very good when you consider that these drops are variable dot sizes. Okay, so every single drop that comes out can be any one of 3 different dot sizes, so that makes this apparent resolution much higher than 720 by 360. This is the most popular printer in the world. Okay, what we're finding is people sometimes come looking at the 7500, they're excited about the speed and performance, but realize that 3500 is actually more than enough for their challenge. And then at the other end, we have the 831, which is our only printer that can do 8-inch and up to 8-inch labels, 8.25-inch print width to be specific. Okay, and this printer, it prints about 2.5 inches per second. This has been a real workhorse in the chemical labeling space because it can do the drum labels, put all the gloss elements down, all the color elements down on demand. By the way, the ink on these printers is a pigment-based ink that with the right media will pass very strict standards like BS 5609, which is required in the chemical industry for labeling of hazardous goods. So we have a pretty broad spectrum. And as we continue to move forward in this space, you're going to see Epson constantly introducing new and better models to cover this space. Let me just talk real quickly now about our most recent introduction, which is the 7500 GE model. Okay, the 7500 GE model is basically a price bundle. It is just a straight 7500G printer. That printer is not unique. However, what we've done is we've included a Wasatch RIP software. RIP means raster image processing. It's a software component that allows you to handle very high quality labeling demands. So for example, if you have a color gradation, the dot control from the Wasatch software is so precise and nuanced that it can make very subtle transitions, let's say from a dark blue to a light blue, or for example, if a blue is supposed to be a very exact color blue, so the customer is trying to match their corporate colors or something like this, or you want to be able to position the image on continuous media, okay, or you're going to print on continuous media, you need to have it add some elements like synchronizing marks that might be used by a die cutter. This software is very powerful for people who need a lot of control over the image, okay? Just for people that are in this space, this is not really a bartender, TechLinks, CodeSoft, Nice Label kind of replacement where those are more like data management, okay? We're going to call them label design also, but they're primarily more data management in terms of the content of the label. It's more image management. So this tends to be focused on people in VA who are going to use this printer as a mini press that they're going to print labels and sell to others, or for in-house printing, but of more prime labels where they said these labels are going to be customer-facing and image quality is really important. So this might be people doing wine labeling or juice labeling, or believe it or not, we're doing a lot in e-cigarettes and these new emerging markets with lots of customer branding. So I'll turn it over to Steve now to talk more about the broader impact of why these color products are so important.
Thank you, Andy. That's a great overview of where the product line is right now. And again, we've got thousands and thousands of these devices now out there in the field. So let's get right into why color. Well, I remember when I was a young boy, and I grew up in the 1960s when computers filled entire rooms and barely had the computing power of the average calculator today. But there were advancements being made, and one of those advancements was in color TV. I remember I was 6 years old. It was 1966. And one of my neighbors was a TV repairman, and he brought home one of the first color TVs that was ever seen in the neighborhood. And it was right around this time, around Thanksgiving, because on Thanksgiving evening, the local broadcast network was going to be showing for the first time ever The Wizard of Oz in color being broadcast. So anyone who had a color TV had to see it. Now, of course, we were too poor to own a color TV at that time. It probably cost about 2 months' salary. So we went over to their house after Thanksgiving dinner, all huddled around this 25-inch console color TV, and that was the first time we ever saw the black and white peacock of the network logo turn into the color peacock, and everyone was amazed. And of course, once the movie started, which of course, if you remember, starts in black and white, and then when Dorothy opens the door when she lands in Oz, it suddenly transfers directly to color, everyone's jaw dropped. And it reminded me of what the impact color has in our lives. So we know color has impact. Color gets attention. Color can definitely make a statement. But even more important for our purposes today, color can solve business challenges. And we'll see how we can use color to meet those challenges. So, of course, there has been an increased demand for color labeling. Some of it has been driven by regulatory compliance, as Andy referred to, with the Global Harmonized System for Hazardous Labels Materials Labeling. So you have to do it right. You have to do it right the first time. There have been a number of hodgepodge solutions in the past, but we've put together complete solutions that allow you to meet those regulations. Pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturers also are starting to see this as well with regulatory compliance. A lot of it is driven by company branding and the corporate image. We're putting more color logos, more targeted messaging, and even custom advertising on labels now than we've seen in the past. For the industrial side, we're solving workflow and packaging handling issues by including color in our labeling within the supply chain and within the warehousing and distribution environment. And this has actually proven to be quite a benefit to those industries that have typically in the past relied on monochrome printing to do their job, but of course had a lot of errors and mistakes associated with it. As I mentioned earlier, we talk about the current trends in color printing, and actually I was interviewed by a VDC analyst very recently who was actually putting together a color on-demand report from VDC. And of course, they are pretty much the leader in telling us where things are going and what trends are happening. And it was actually a very informative interview. They were picking my brains on what I've seen and what we see going on in the industry. And of course, we very quickly realized that we were both on the same page as far as what is happening with regards to trends in color labeling for the industrial environment. And of course, the biggest point here is that we have new technologies available. Of course, technology drives a lot of these solutions because what we couldn't do before, we can certainly do now. And that, of course, is testament to the Epson's commitment to their investment in the precision core technology for their printheads. Also, the C7500, as you saw, does not use a moving printhead to go back and forth. It uses a full-width printhead, which is, of course, why it can go so fast. So we're seeing a migration now into technologies that are similar to thermal transfer, but again, replacing the thermal transfer media and ink now with inkjet technology. But one of the biggest benefits we're seeing from customers in the industrial environment is the replacing of pre-printed forms with blank media. There are a lot of issues with having to manage and maintain unique label sets, and reducing that certainly can help in productivity as well as possibly lower costs. And the time and space it takes to maintain and take care of these labels and eliminate the mistakes of people taking the wrong label are certainly of benefit to most organizations. And we can print in batches for storage, for use later on, or on application equipment, or on demand for immediate use in printing one or two labels as necessary. And by putting together all of this with enterprise-level design packages for software to manage the color labels and manage the requirements in production, sort of became the main focus trends in color printing, and in enterprise printing in general, if you think about it. So when we started taking a look at the markets and verticals that could benefit from it, the list just kept growing and growing. There really wasn't any area that I could think of that really couldn't benefit from utilizing color labeling within their environment. And that means, of course, whether you have to do it because it's chemical labeling, or you're looking for a new way to print your product labels, or you're looking for a new way to handle your products within the supply chain environment. So whether it comes down to manufacturing or logistics and transportation, color pops out. You know, we've been using barcodes for a long time, and of course it is the de facto standard. But having that extra sensory input of having color on the label is proving to be a big benefit in those environments. Of course, the pharmaceutical and medical equipment environments as well, food and beverage labels, hospital and healthcare, shelf labeling at the retail level, and of course lots of consumer products. I've been seeing a lot of these new boutique-type products popping up, and customers are looking for a smarter, more efficient way to get their labels printed rather than using the standard pre-print route. And of course, if you have to deal with a large box retailer that you're selling to, in many cases they may be demanding color labels on the cartons and cases of products. But that can lead us to other specialized applications like custom branded products, where I make products for lots of different people and I need to constantly be changing what's on the label. Or co-packers who pretty much do the same thing but are manufacturing the product as well for somebody else. And even things as simple as a photo ID badge with a color photo of somebody on it. So how are people making the transition to color labeling? Well, it's all about looking at what you're currently doing now and what we can do for you in the future by utilizing color in your label. And that might be a productivity enhancement. So we look at things like how many labels you currently use right now are pre-printed, and can they be consolidated? How many different SKUs or stock keeping units do you have to support or manage? Typically we find the more SKUs that you have to deal with, the higher this burden becomes, and you're constantly having to keep up to date with the correct pre-printed labels and manage and maintain them properly. We also look for things that might be unique information on the label that could be enhanced by color or that might require color, so that we can make that pop out from the label so that it's visible to the end user without too much work. We also take a look at what type of label formats you're currently in use. As Andy mentioned before, we have a way of going directly into ZPL environments with the C7500 printer and drop it in place and not only use your existing code to print your labels, but also enhance it by adding color that could be loaded into the memory of the printer to be printed at the time of print for that label set. And of course, most customers now are looking at label design and software to support their solutions. So you have to have in place either PDF files of what you need to do, or you need to be utilizing a label design software to do that for you. So, does your print room look like this? I've been to lots of customers where I see exactly this every day, and in fact, a few of these pictures are from customers that I've been to recently, and you see that the mountain of pre-printed labels grows rather quickly, and with even the best intentions of keeping it managed properly, mistakes are going to happen, labels are going to run out, people are going to pick the wrong labels at the time of print, and it really is a messy situation that is typically tolerated by most customers because they really just don't know any other way to do it. But of course there are other ways to do it. Instead of hanging rolls of labels on the wall and makeshift broom handles and pieces of pipe or on large shelf racks that do need to be maintained properly, there is another way, and there is a more sane way of dealing with this. And that, of course, involves moving away from the two-step process. And this allows us to enhance the workflow within the print room environment and in our operations and production. So typically in the standard two-step process, you've got somebody responsible, and sometimes in many cases it's a full-time job, to order, receive, and inspect all the labels that are used for production. So of course they're constantly rooting through boxes to make sure they got the right orders in. This was short a case, this was over a case. How do I manage that? How do I get that together? How do I get it into my stockroom area, which is the second area? So you end up with huge stocks of these pre-printed labels that you have to keep in a storage area and keep them safe and keep them controlled environment. And then we get to the most critical stage of it, and that's picking the right roll of labels for the job that's currently being done for the production run that's about to occur. And the end users who are operating the printers in the print shop area or on the line constantly need to be changing these all the time. I recently had my wife, she's decorating the house for Halloween, for Thanksgiving, and she brought home some candles to light around the house to make it smell like Thanksgiving. And she bought one that was supposed to be a baked apple pie scent. And we lit it and realized it didn't smell like baked apple pie. It smelled like black cherry. I look at the label, and it says baked apple pie. And I'm thinking to myself, I know what happened here. And I looked at the label, and sure enough, they were printing a date and lot code on the label as well for production. So they must have pulled the wrong label from the stack, put it in the printer, brought it out to production, and I'm sure that there's an awful lot of people who thought they were getting warm baked apple pie candles who now realize it's a black cherry candle. So these are the kind of things that we want to try and reduce and avoid by streamlining and enhancing the workflow for your on-demand printing. So in the second scenario, where we remove the preprints, we consolidate all of our labels down to blank stock labels of the specific sizes that are required. This, in most cases, will reduce the inventory by at least 3/4, if not more, and in many cases, customers begin to look at it and standardize on specific sizes so that they don't have too many sizes that they have to worry about all the time. So what you end up with is very easy on the procurement side of ordering and receiving and inspecting them, very easy to stock and store, and then very easy for the end user. All they need to do is make sure they put the right size label in the printer to make sure that they get the proper output. And I think that you see here that there are multiple benefits to moving from the two-step process to a consolidated print on demand. And of course, this is even more true for your GHS labels, because the pre-printing challenge there was that you may have a number of variable different types of products that require different numbers of diamonds for the pictograms to appear on the label. So now you have to account for that and purchase all of those pre-print stocks, and again, once you put them in the printer, you must make sure you have the right one in there. Now, some customers have been playing a little fast and loose with this compliance by having just all the diamonds they could possibly need put on the label and blocking out the ones that they don't want to use. This is a dangerous ground to be on, and I think moving forward, you're going to see more and more customers moving out of that. That was just a stopgap measure, and moving towards a solution that is similar to the Epson Print Color on Demand that provides the solution to that challenge by going from a single blank stock directly to all of the printed material, including your logos, your barcodes, your fine text down to 4-point font in many cases I've been very successful with, and applying the pictograms with the diamonds in place. Now, there are actually more applications other than just the compliance types for adding color coding to your labels and tags. And this, I think, is going to become one of the leading solutions moving forward in the industrial space, because it really gives you the flexibility to begin adding more information and more intelligence to the labels that you print, as opposed to the monochrome, barcode, and large print text labels that we've used in the past. So Now, what are some of the things that we can use a color code for? Well, it could be a product category. You produce 3 or 4 different types of categories of products. You want to be able to identify them easily at a glance. Of course, sizes and styles, very important on the retail side. If you're manufacturing products that are of different sizes, of having that information easily available. One of the first applications I actually ever did for color many, many years ago with other technology was for a delivery stop issue. Customer was having all kinds of pains with the wrong product getting delivered at the wrong delivery stops by their delivery truck drivers. So what we did was we implemented a color square on each one of the customer labels that were placed on each case and carton. So they knew when they got to stop number 1, all the red label boxes go off. When they get to stop number 2, all the blue label boxes go off, and so on. And it saved them tens of thousands of dollars a year in chargebacks and redeliveries of products. We can also use it in work in process to show the status of a product as it's being manufactured, or that it needs to be pulled out of manufacturing for whatever reason. Of course, your typical hazard alerts, red means, bad, green means good, yellow means caution, always helpful. Location information as well. You could color code locations to quickly be able to locate products or place them back. And of course, a color product image can go on there as well. Now, what you're seeing in the picture here is an application that I did for a company that manufactured large bundles of plumbing tubes. And this is actually done on a polyester stock, printing out on perforated labels that can actually be torn off at the bottom and punched holes in them so that they could be wired to the bundles. And we used the color to indicate the category of the product in this case, because the workers in the factory were having a hard time trying to reference the part number that you see in the big bold numbers to what category of product that was when they were picking an order or moving product around. So this gave them the ability not only to see that, but also be able to tear off smaller tags on the bottom that could be attached to other bundles or other places on the bundle where they could use them. Very successful application. A little bit outside of the industrial applications are the retail and product labeling. Now, this actually does tie into, manufacturers of products, because you're doing this at the point of manufacturing rather than afterwards. So this is all about producing those customer-facing labels for your either cases, cartons, or tags, whether it be the shoe box that the shoes go into, the sneakers go into, or the product that the box is going into, if it's just a nondescript box, or even a case of those products to be able to identify them properly. So by having that easy identification of a product by utilizing variable graphic images, when I do, a generic image, it doesn't show me the actual component or the actual part. It's just a generic image. You can actually have the actual image graphics embedded in it as well. Another key indicator as well is size and color indicators. This is more for backroom operations, let's say at the retail level. I have an entire backroom full of boxes of sneakers. I'm easily able to identify the size and color and style of the shoe that I'm looking for my customer, maybe making a 10-minute wait down to a 1-minute wait for that customer. The less time they wait, the more they buy. So again, it's a great thing for increasing productivity for workers who then have to deal with your product after the fact. It can also be used industrially for highlighting important data, things like your date codes and pricing information, in particular expiration dates, which you might want to have in bold if it's very important. Or again, utilizing color to indicate a category for a part number or where it may be located within a facility. And again, this is in addition to the barcodes and the text that we put on these labels, but it adds that extra layer of intelligence to a label. We're starting to see a little bit of color creep into the shipping label. Now, of course, if you ever get anything from Amazon or UPS or FedEx, you see the standard ubiquitous UPS or FedEx label on it, which of course is what gets it from here to there. But realizing that there's more real estate on some of these labels than is actually being used, it's now an opportunity to go ahead and add things like color logos for corporate messaging, or a tagline, or specially coded instructions that may be in color, especially for things that are urgent or how it's going to ship. Again, all these things help you in the supply chain process to avoid errors and have a more seamless solution for the label to actually do its job. Then, of course, we have all these general shipping labels. These are the labels that you put on a box that tell people not to crush, mangle, or otherwise mutilate the box. And that's always a good thing, because it's important to warn people when there is something that they shouldn't do. These are typically purchased pre-printed. They're very, very widely used. They typically are just hanging from a bar at the shipping area, and a work order comes through and they know it's a fragile item or needs to be placed a certain way, they grab the appropriate labels to do it and slap it on. Of course, they provide the warnings that they need, and of course, can be achieved just as easily utilizing a color on-demand labeling system as pre-printing them. And that way it gives you the flexibility to do whatever you want and have a library of these labels within your software to be able to print on-demand as needed. Of course, it all comes down to what you're actually putting that image on. And Andy talked about the pigment ink being used by the Epson printers and the Precision Core technology. There is now a wide variety of media options that are compatible with this technology, and they come in either roll or fan fold form for the C7500 and the C3500 models, and they come in a pin feed tractor form factor for the C831 for doing those big 8.5-inch drum labels for GHS compliance. And of course, there's lots of face stocks available too. So depending on the application, whether it just requires plain paper, which is fine for standard industrial applications, but matte paper provides an even better quality image due to the pigment adhesion to it. And then there are even glossy and semi-glossy papers. Of course, Andy referred to the C7500G model as being the glossy paper or glossy synthetic material specific model. And then, of course, we have our matte polyethylene or our synthetic products, typically used more in the GHS environment or where you need to have a long-lasting, durable label. And of course, as Andy indicated before, that we do have media that is GHS certified for the BS5609 certification, which of course means it can withstand the harshest environments and still be able to be read and adhere to the product that it's affixed to. Of course, there are custom labels and tags as well as stock label sizes that are available. So, check with us to see if something for an application you need is either stock or requires a custom label or tag, and we can work with multiple vendors. And that's one of the keys here is that we just don't work with one vendor for our labels. We have multiple that we can work with. Of course, how do you actually get your design on the label? Well, some customers are using PDF files. They're typically done in Adobe Illustrator, sometimes hard to manage, hard to make changes to, can't put variable data in place. So what we have in place of that, by completing the on-demand color solution, is the software that goes with it. And at Peak-Ryzex, we are a certified enterprise partner for Siegel Scientific and their Bartender 2016 software. And we've been an expert in Bartender for decades now, providing solutions that are directly integrated into customer systems and providing seamless printing applications so that regardless of what hardware you're using, the system is scalable. Now, the new features in Bartender, especially when it revolves around color labeling, involves the label template and revision control. In other words, keeping track of all of your label templates, managing them properly, making sure only the proper operators have access, having a workflow process in place to be able to assign labels to be designed and then approve those labels for production. And, of course, added security features for validated solutions. Anytime you're dealing with pharmaceutical or medical equipment, they have to have security features to make sure that no one can tamper with the labels or mess with them. So that's all built into Bartender and allows us to create complete enterprise solutions. It also is optimized for color design. So adding color to existing monochrome label designs is very easy with Bartender. And, of course, the flexibility of being able to change those label designs at any time is important. And, of course, at Peak-Ryzex, we provide professional services to help you leverage existing databases or connect to ERP systems so that we can seamlessly print your labels out directly without any intervention from your end users. So what are some of the things to consider when putting together a successful print solution? Well, there's all different types and categories available out there, from the simplest, which would be a turnkey labeling system, where out of the box you get your printer, you get your software, you get your training, and of course, anything that involves to set up and be printing right off the bat. The ink, the media, whatever you need, we put it together to meet your needs. There's also the labeling software that we just talked about, helping customers get set up and started the right way, utilizing the best practices for utilizing the Siegel Scientific Bartender software. And that can include label format design and the integration features into your ERP system or into an existing database. And then being able to utilize that database information to add color elements to the database so that each label comes out with the appropriate information for what's being printed and the appropriate colors if being used. And this involves a lot of consultation with our customers. I talk to customers pretty much every day about these subjects, and the consultation factor is very key to creating a successful solution for our customers. And that can be selecting the right printer hardware, providing software training, providing custom front-end applications, and even providing go-live support, and of course, lifecycle maintenance services to make sure that we can keep the solution running well after the sale. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to talk about 3 case studies very quickly. The first one was for the Lindy Group, and they are a manufacturer of specialty gases used in the semiconductor industry, and their requirement was for a DOT and GHS label that goes on the tall cylinders of gas that you probably see in the backs of trucks sometimes going off to a construction site or going off to a manufacturing plant. And these are very exotic gases that they provide to the semiconductor industry. And it's very critical that the right gas be in the right cylinder when it's put into production. You can imagine a manufacturer of silicon chips getting ready into production and puts the wrong gas cylinder into their machine and starts it up. They could literally destroy millions of dollars worth of chips and possibly their equipment as well. So the vendor that Lindy worked with required them to have a solution in place that not only put the correct DOT and GHS label on the printer, and that would replace their existing preprint labels, to make sure that only the labels printed for those cylinders were printed at the time they were packing the cylinder. So again, that doesn't rely on somebody walking over to a roll of labels on a rack where all kinds of labels are applied and pulling the wrong one and putting it on a cylinder with the wrong gas in it. So they are printing them out directly. This actually involves the customer scanning a barcode on a work order sheet from SAP that actually produces the label out on the Epson C831 printer right there at the end user's workstation. So they simply take it off the printer and put it directly onto the cylinder. So the result of this was that they became GHS compliant. Their vendor approved and validated the solution and said, yes, this will certainly reduce, if not eliminate, the errors we were getting. And we simplified their process by having a complete database of all of their different gases so that we could pull from the database and print through a custom front-end application that we at Peak-Ryzex designed specifically for the end user. They're in use with this today at multiple locations. I know it only shows maybe a few printers here, but it actually was rolled out to all their locations within the last 2 years. The next case study overviews what I would refer to as a co-packer application. Millstone Medical Outsourcing is a medical device packaging partner. So they don't make the products. They simply take the sterilized product from the customer, and in their sterilized facilities, they package and they label the product for general use. So we were talking about things in a sterile to non-sterile environment and repackaging in a sterile environment. And Millstone is a leader in that and works with many equipment manufacturers to provide their last piece of the puzzle in getting their product out. So the requirements were to move from the preprint colors and go to variable data on-demand color labels so that we could display the critical features and have product images that were in color and fulfill the customer's branding and design needs as well. Since they are a co-packer, it's not their brand that goes on the product, it's the customer's. So the Epson C7500G printers were put in place there along with specialized software that Millstone provided to be able to have a cloud solution that lets the customers design their labels, review, approve, and print to make sure that it is a validated solution. And they get their photo quality labels, and they were very able to quickly pass the FDA validation test. And that was a key point in here for being FDA and unique device, information compliant. And we provided all of the features from the printer to the services to the media and label design support and training for this customer. And they will be rolling this out and are rolling this out now to their customers as part of their solution. And the final case study is a private label branding example. The 100-year-old provider of custom print media for specialty and engineering, blueprint size pages, specialty media that's used for invitations and fancy brochures and catalogs and wide format information. So they're a converter of media, and of course they would package and then label their own products, and they would either be sold in boutique stationery stores or sold directly to customers. So there is some private label branding involved. So they were typically doing these in generic monochrome labels. They looked rather blah and boring, and of course when they're putting these reams of paper on the shelf in a stationery store, they wanted it to look much better. So a more customized label that included the logos and graphics in full color was appealing to them, and they make many different products for many different customers, so the preprint option would be prohibitively expensive for them. They also had an ERP system in place, and they wanted to be able to print their labels directly from there instead of the standalone label system they were using in the past. So on-demand printing was a perfect solution for them. We put in place there the C7500 printers as well for doing these labels and integrating it, utilizing the Bartender Enterprise Automation software to their ERP system to select the right template, pull the data from the system, and print the labels. We also provided the media, the ink, the on-site maintenance, and professional services to install and get the system up and running and connected to the ERP system. And as a result, they now have very high-quality labels coming out of their facility. They started out with one of these printers to try it and see if they could really do it, and by the time they were done with that, they purchased 6 more printers for a few of their other facilities as well as their own. So it really proved that once they understood what it could do and the benefit they could get from it, they wanted to roll it out to all their facilities. So when taking the next step in on-demand color label printing, again, what we're looking for is a trusted advisor, a company that can provide the solution consulting, has the vendor support, as we see with Epson and the close relationship we have with them now on our product line. Selecting the right hardware, we're not out to just sell any piece of hardware. It must be the right piece of hardware for the solution with the right media and ink, utilizing our consultants to make sure we have everything in line, and providing the software and integration solutions to put the entire puzzle together, and then complete that with our depot and on-site support maintenance services. So I want to thank you all very much for your time today. I hope this has been informative to you. I know it's been very informative to me as far as what we're doing in the future and what our customers really wanted to hear, and this presentation was geared towards that. At this point, I guess we'll go into our questions area. Kate, did you want to jump in here?
Sure, and thanks again, Andy and Steven. We're getting a lot of feedback in the Q&A. Unfortunately, we're running a little short on time, so we're just going to take a couple, but be assured that if you ask the question and we don't get to it today, we will be reaching out in the next few days, a week or two, just to answer your questions and see if there's anything else that we can help you with regarding this webinar and what's provided. So we're going to start off. We have a question from Ed. Ed wants to know, how can I reduce my total cost of ownership when moving to an industrial color label printing system?
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, when you're looking at a solution like this and comparing it to staying with a monochrome label versus moving to color on demand, there are a number of features to consider. Number one, you can get in at a low equipment cost with a product like the C3500. As you can see, they're not far off from the prices of what you see for a thermal printer in many cases. Also, the ink pricing is fixed at a manufacturer's advertised pricing, so that there are no fluctuations in ink pricing. As well, as more and more converters and vendors of media get on board with inkjet technology, and of course they are now and ramping up their production facilities, the cost of media will begin to drop, and we will see it become competitive with the thermal transfer types media and giving us a little bit more leeway in the cost. I'd like to look at the enhancement and what you get out of the color from a cost solution. And one of the things customers are doing to reduce their total cost of label printing is looking at the label design. If you don't have to have a full color bleed and can get away with spot color or lines of color or small color logos, by optimizing the design of the label, you can reduce your ink cost significantly and lower your total overall cost.
Hey, Steve, I'd like to add a little perspective to this thing here, too, which is for years, we've had very simple technology. It's all been pretty much black and white, and it all boils down to, okay, what's my cost per label? And one of the different ways I think that everybody can be more successful selling and integrating solutions is to turn this equation around a little bit, rather than just having a talk about label costs. And as Steve pointed out, ways that, the technology is very competitive in that way, I still prefer to look at it, this situation from how can I improve your business, okay? Companies can only do so much by cutting costs, okay? But the real goal for a business is to grow their business, okay? So the question is going to be to things, so for example, if you're labeling your box of shoes, with just a written description of what's inside that box, and it ends up in a typical sporting goods store today where the stock is out on the floor, can the end user find your shoe? Even if the shoe is in the store, if the end user doesn't find it, the shopper goes there and says, oh, they didn't have it in my color or size, and leaves, that's a stock out, even though the shoe was actually there. If there's a picture on the box, how much additional will you sell? Okay, in a warehouse, what is your cost for a missorted item? Okay, if the item is on the wrong shelf, and it could have been easily identified because you used a color code placement tag, if that cuts down even 1%, 2%, 0.5%, 1/100% of sorting errors, what does that do to your accuracy? How about picking accuracy? If you're grabbing the wrong item, we're adding a picture, color code, or things. Okay, so a lot of businesses can benefit from on-demand color, okay, in demonstrable ways that they actually have enhanced, sales. I mean, we have a case study where a company was selling a form of games, okay, to corporate clients and everything, and they said our sales grew by 15% because they just could find what they were looking for on the shelf. I mean, it's crazy, but so let's not only just look at this equation from what's the cheapest way to make a label, what's my label cost. Think about how to become more of a business consultant to our clients and show them how they can actually improve their operations, reduce errors, and improve and streamline their business with on-demand color.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Can I use any labels in an Epson Color inkjet printer?
Thank you, Kate. This is Steve. Unfortunately, the answer is no. The inkjet printing technology designed by Epson utilizing the pigment ink requires an inkjet face coating to be placed on the labels. As I mentioned before, all of our vendors for media have ramped up over the last couple of years to be able to provide both stock and custom versions of the specialty media. So the first rule of thumb is don't put your thermal transfer printer media into an Epson color printer. Make sure you talk to us and make sure we get you the right media with the right face coating for your application.
Great. Okay, I know that we're running up to an hour now, so we're going to cut off the questions at this time, but please feel free to reach out with more questions. You can see the Peak-Ryzex information to call there. And also, if you asked a question through our Q&A, Andy and Steve or someone from the Peak-Ryzex or Epson team will be reaching out to you within the following days to answer any questions you have. We did have a question from Teak asking if this webinar will be available post-event, and it will be. We'll be releasing it on demand within the next day, so keep an eye out tomorrow for an email regarding how to access that information. Again, this is Kate, and thank you again, Andy and Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
No problem. And thanks for joining us, everyone. Had a great turnout, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a good day.